quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the North Carolina Broadcast Legends Production Fund, including contributions from the following. For a complete list of project funders, go to unctv.org/nclegends.
Welcome to North Carolina Broadcast Legends, featuring industry leaders sharing stories from the rich and significant history of the broadcasting business here in our state. I'm your host, Mike Weeks. Carl Venters Jr. knew he wanted to be a radio announcer in his early teens. A good friend of Carl's father was an announcer on a CBS radio show called Let's Pretend, a kids show broadcast live on Saturday mornings from CBS studios in the heart of New York City. This was early 1940 and radio was king. Television was yet to come. And on several occasions, Carl's dad would take him into the city to attend the show's live broadcast. Now, Mr. Venters' announcer friend would give young Carl some of the show scripts to take home, and Carl would then get another young friend, and they'd read the scripts back and forth just as if they were the CBS announcers. Carl knew then what he wanted to do. He wanted to be on the radio. But little did he know back then that this exposure to a live kids radio program would not only change his life, but would change the lives of the American FM radio listener forever when on December 26, 1972 at midnight, Carl launched the first album-oriented rock format radio station in the country, a launch that revolutionized the FM radio station business. Carl Venters Jr. is a past president of the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, a recipient of their Distinguished Service Award, a member of the North Carolina Broadcasting Hall of Fame, and so much more. Carl, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored.
You have a rich history, but let's talk about when you were a child. You were born in Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Correct.
And your father was an attorney who had recently graduated from UNC Law School. What happened then?
Well, he got a job in New York. So there I go to New York from Rocky Mount as an infant. And a few years later, just as you said, one of his friends, an announcer, was with CBS, and I went in to see one of the live programs. And he was a great person, John Allen Wolfe. He even taught me how to play the trumpet. And I watched John Allen Wolfe read that script live. I said, that's really cool. I'd like to do that. And as you said, they gave me scripts and I took them home, and another friend and I, we would read them and practice. And then my father returned to North Carolina, to Jacksonville, North Carolina, right after World War II. And there was no radio or TV much in the area, Eastern North Carolina. And a little radio station went on the air, WJNC, and I said, I've got to go to work there. By the time I got into high school, I was ready. They gave me a part-time job being an announcer on WJNC in Jacksonville. And I knew then that's what I wanted to do.
Now, Carl, you're a radio DJ. That's a pretty big deal in high school. Tell us about your celebrity status with the other students.
Well, it was wonderful. The girls really liked it. But we did a lot of things in those days. In fact, I would go on top of what they call the IT drive-in, and I had a radio booth. And we'd play records, and all the kids would drive up in their cars and send up requests, and we do that live on the air. Oh. So that's how I got started until I went to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and knew then I wanted to major in radio, TV, and motion pictures, which I did. And when I got there was a student radio station, and it was an FM station. Well, nobody knew what FM was, really. WBT in Charlotte had donated a used FM transmitter to the university because they were getting ready to gear up for FM. And it was low power. So the university put it on the air and named it WUNC FM, 91.5 of the dial. And I went to work there as a part-time producer, announcer, news. In those days, of course, everything still was live. There was really just the beginning of tape, audio tape. And that's where I sort of cut my teeth. John Young was the director of the station, the faculty director. And I worked my way up and became the general manager, student general manager of WUNC FM.
Now, Carl, let's tell people, what kind of music did WUNC FM play?
It was all classical.
What did you know about classical music?
Nothing. But we learned to pronounce just oops, you see, Brahms and all that.
Yeah.
And I had a really great staff working with me. One, Carl Castle was my news director.
Wow.
Carl Castle went on to become one of the preeminent people in public broadcasting in Washington, D.C., and others. And that was a great experience. And we would go out with our little Ampex tape recorder and go to Hill Hall and record a concerto of some sort. Take it back to the studio, put it on the air. Live announcers, live news.
Wow.
And that was great training. And I did that through the time I graduated. Well, in the meantime, in my senior year, WUNC TV came on the air, Channel 4, in the same building that the radio station was in. So some of us, and we were majoring in broadcasting, decided we wanted to go to work there. So I worked part-time at Channel 4 in 1955, believe it or not, till I graduated.
Well, in fact, UNC TV went on the air January 8th, 1955.
That's right.
So that's exactly right. But let's backtrack for 1 second, too.
Yeah.
You had another well-known classmate involved, and that was Charles Kuralt.
Charlie Kuralt. Charlie and I met each other. We were both auditioning for a narrator's job in the studio, and I sat next to Charlie, and we introduced ourselves, and I said, I'm Carl Venice from Jacksonville, North Carolina, and he said, I'm Charles Kuralt from Charlotte. I said, you know, I don't think I'll get this narrator's job, and I didn't. And Charlie and I became really good friends, and we did the radio, but he really was concentrating then on the journalistic side, or the print media, and he had been advised by Ed Murrow, because Ed Murrow had taken him under his wing, to go and be a journalist.
And Ed Murrow was at CBS,
yes,
nationally acclaimed. Today we have the Murrow Award, which is for journalism excellence. Really a big name then as well as
yes.
now.
And he was very interested in Charlie Kuralt. But he told Charlie, go to work for the newspaper. So Charlie became the editor of the Daily Tar Heel, which is the university's student newspaper. And I was the manager of the UNC FM. So he and I had the media at Chapel Hill.
You were quite a pair.
Well, I should say he had a lot more influence than I did, because in those days, as it is now too, print journalism certainly is very strong. So that was a good relationship, and we stayed in touch for years, and we were very good friends.
Let's talk about UNC TV. It goes on the air. You're there the initial days. In fact, John Young is involved in that, who you've also had experience in working with, an advisor in the TV, radio, newspaper, or news department. What did UNC TV look like in those days?
Well, it was in the studio in Swain Hall, and the studio was actually turned out to be a very, very easy studio to work in. Control room and offices upstairs. And then I left, though, graduated, and I was a little worried about getting drafted, and so I went and enlisted in the Marine Corps and went to OCS. They made me a communications officer.
Now let's tell people what OCS is.
Officers Course.
Officers Course, Officers Training School.
I became a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and I thought, well, I don't think there's going to be any broadcast jobs, but I was a communications officer, and that was good. But I ended up down in near Miami, of all places, and I got a part-time job at a Miami radio station, even while I was in active duty in the Marine Corps, which was allowed. And I was on at night, and I would introduce Larry King.
Oh my gosh! So you go from Carl Castle and Charles Kuralt to Larry King.
Well, Larry King and I were the same age, and Larry had gotten a job working out of a restaurant in Miami, interviewing celebrities. In those days, celebrities like Frank Sinatra, Dinah Shore. I was back at the studio, and I would say, and now from the Lincoln Road restaurant, here's Larry King. Tonight, Larry's going to talk to Frank Sinatra.
Oh my gosh.
That was a big deal.
Wow.
Yes, and so I was able to continue my interest in the radio at the time. Then, as I was getting ready to leave the Marine Corps 3.5 years later, John Young called me from Chapel Hill and said, "We really are going really great at Channel 4. I'd like you to come up and be our program director." I couldn't believe it. What an offer. And I did, moved to Chapel Hill, my family, and became program director, WUNC TV, Channel 4. Now again, that's before videotape. All we had was kinescopes. And
What is a kinescope?
It's a film.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a film that was suitable for television.
So you would film events.
Yes.
And sporting events in particular.
But not much, though. We didn't do much. The kinescopes were done mostly by the network, PBS network. One called PBS then, and they'd send those in, and they were kind of black and white and grainy. Wasn't really good. So we had to produce our own stuff live. I mean, live like dance recitals in a studio live. And then sporting events, we couldn't do too much because television hadn't really gotten into sports. But there I met two students. One was Wade Hargrove, who would later have a great influence on my life, and Woody Durham. Woody Durham was a young student, and he loved sports. And he would talk to me about, let's do more sports. So I had already done sports in my little, well, I should say I hadn't done sports, but I had done some earlier on. So I got Woody, and we would go up to the press box at Gideon Stadium and during a game, and Woody would practice play-by-play. And then later on, we decided maybe we could, and we got permission, to take the game films and put the game films on Sunday night on Channel 4. And we'd set up a monitor in the studio. Woody would sit down in front of the monitor, take the play-by-play, read it, and we would put crowd noise behind it, and Woody would do the play-by-play of the UNC football game that had been recorded on film.
The day before.
The day before.
Yeah, so the games are played on Saturday.
Yeah.
You got the game films,
Yeah.
and one of the threats at that time, I guess not a threat, but radio was worried that
yes.
if television carried live sporting events, it might impact their business.
Yes. And later they did. So they got together with the radio people and television, and they called it Broad Vision. That way, the FCC allowed people to watch the video and then listen to the games on radio.
So they took the radio announce and put it with the game video.
Yeah.
And that was called Broad Vision.
Broad Vision.
Wow.
And then later on, a fellow by the name of C.D. Chesley came along and decided, well, we can do live television of the basketball games. We had the only remote bus. Now, a remote bus is the bus that was equipped to go places and do live television.
UNC TV.
UNC TV. And he would lease the bus from us and lease our staff. So we would go to Clemson, we would go to Virginia, we'd go places and do the live broadcast.
Wow.
With some very, very important announcers later on. And C.D. Chesley, of course, started that. Saturday afternoon basketball was the big thing throughout the ACC. And radio still was there, but it worked out fine.
Wow, you were in control of the programming here at UNC TV.
That was my job.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah,
Gosh, what a story.
And then we began to do things like, we had live 6 o'clock newscasts.
Wow.
Just like the commercial stations. And Woody Durham was my sports director.
Whoa.
And I did the weather.
Really? Well, tell us about that. How, no weather graphics. How did you do that?
I did it with a whiteboard and a magic marker.
And so, what would you put on the whiteboard?
Oh, I would say it's getting partly cloudy. I draw big clouds. But I was reminded later that didn't look too good. It looked like something else, and I shouldn't do that. So, but that was the best we could do in those days.
Yeah. And if it was raining?
If it was raining, well, you just
Raindrops?
draw raindrops.
Wow. So you did the weather, and at that time, Woody Durham was sports
director.
Who did the news?
Well, had various people.
Different people.
So,
wow.
And that, I don't know how long that lasted. A few years later is when I left UNC TV because radio was beginning to bubble up. Coming back is the word. It has sort of gone away with the advent of television. And the little small radio stations were being put on the air throughout all of the country, but here in North Carolina. So another fellow and I who worked at UNC TV, Cloyd Wade, we said, let's go buy one of these radio stations. So we went to Farmville, North Carolina, where we found one for sale. We put $7,000 down and bought the radio station. And he and I moved down there. We later bought a station in Fuquay Arena, and he went there, and I stayed in Farmville.
Now, tell us about the Farmville station. What were the call letters, and what did they stand for?
The call letters were WFAG, stood for Watching the Farmville Area Grow. Later, it got translated into something else, but that was okay. And on the Watching the Farmville Area Grow, the cross on the G was a cigarette with smoke coming up because it was a tobacco market.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was tobacco.
Pitt County was one of the largest tobacco producing counties in North Carolina. So there was a great affinity. Also, WFAG, I believe fag was slang for a half-smoked cigarette.
Yes.
So not only watching Farmville Area Grow, you had the connection with tobacco, so it all kind of made sense.
Yeah, because in those days they called cigarettes fags.
Yeah.
Interesting, wasn't it?
Interesting.
Things change. So,
they do.
I was there for almost 12 years, and it was the days were nothing but AM, still no FM. FM was around, but the FCC had sort of stymied the growth of FM because the big network guys did not want FM to grow very fast because their money was in their big AM radio stations, CBS, NBC, all the big 50,000 watt radio stations all over the country. So FM didn't grow very fast, even though it had been invented years and years ago. But it was beginning to, and stations were beginning to get FM. But mostly we were doing just pure local radio. And the rest of the state had local radio stations. And we all did that, and that was great radio, by the way. People could tune in. They knew exactly what was going on in their town. I got up, did the morning show, 6 a.m., went all the way to 9 o'clock, did a little talk show with my sales manager, then went out and ran the radio station for the rest of the day.
Wow.
That was fun, really fun.
Well, I think the importance of relationship in all of our interviews that we've done in this series come to light because one day you hear from a former colleague of yours, not only a classmate, but someone that you worked with, I believe, at both the radio and the television and at UNC TV, Wade Hargrove.
Yes. Wade and I became very good friends because I became the president of the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters while I was still in Farmville, which I was very, very excited to do that and to be chosen. And Wade had become a communications attorney. And he had been in Washington, D.C., and then back to Raleigh. And Wade called me one day and said, I understand that Durham Life Insurance Company that owns WPTF and WPTFM is interested in a new manager. Dick Mason had been the manager from the very beginning, almost the beginning in the 30s. Of WPTF AM, big 50,000 watt Raleigh radio station, great radio station. And I went up to Raleigh, took the position, became president of Durham Life Broadcasting.
Wow, from Farmville, the little AM station, to the president of Durham Life Broadcasting. That's a big jump.
There was a little bit of, well, I should say a little bit, very important thing that happened between those times. I applied for a radio station in New Bern, an AM station, and the FM went with it. Put the FM on the air. All the FMs were classical music. I did say to a friend, Dan Henderson, I said, Dan, I wonder if we could just put contemporary music, meaning just top 40 music, on our FM, just to have something to do with it, because we're interested in the AM. And we did. We just put sort of top 40, I'd say top 40 from Frank Sinatra to whatever, on the FM. Hadn't been done before. And it really was a big hit. Then I went from there, though, to Raleigh, to Durham Life Broadcasting. But I already had in my mind, FM does pretty good when it has different formats other than classical music. Nothing wrong with classical music. And FM helped develop that. So when I got to WPTF, that was doing very well, but WPTF FM was a full power 100,000 watt FM station playing classical music and hardly any revenue. Very hard to sell advertisers on classical music. Good listening base, very loyal. So I started thinking, my two teenage sons in high school kept saying to me, Dad, nobody is playing this music that we like. And I said, what's that? And they said, you know, the Rolling Stones, the Who. And I said, the Who? Who? And he said, it's being played by college music stations, which are
right.
low power, and no format at all. They just throw a record on. Well, we all love this music, and all my friends and people in college like this. And I think that should be, we don't have it on the radio. So that gave me the idea. So I called my friend Dan Henderson again. He was up in Detroit with ABC, and I told him, I said, I think we should put some contemporary music on. He said, well, I've got just the guy to do it. He's a young man named Lee Abrams. He's researched this rock music, that's what we were calling it, before we called it AOR, and he's got a format. ABC won't let him use it. I flew to Detroit twice and taught Lee to come down to Raleigh, and we talked about how would we position the station. Well, stereo was big then. Everybody was having stereo sets in their homes, and there's a little bit, not much stereo radio, of course, but quadraphonic was the big thing now. 4 speakers in a room, 1 in each corner. So we said, let's take advantage of this. And Lee said, well, you know, that's funny. I've done some research. Q is the most memorable letter.
Q?
Q. So QDR, quadraphonic. So we named the station WQDR.
So you were getting ready to not only change the format, but to change the call letters
Yes.
from WPTF FM to WQDR FM.
Yes. I was
Wow.
putting my job in jeopardy.
You were putting your job on the line.
That's exactly right. But we got together, Lee developed, put the format in place. We hired our announcers and went on the air. And sure enough, the letters to the editor of the News and Observer was to get rid of me.
They didn't like that.
No, I didn't like that. But all of a sudden,
Yeah.
this audience appeared. And my announcers were good. It was a totally different kind of radio. Very few commercials, played music back to back, and then began to call it album-oriented rock. Now, that meant that those days we played, 33 1/3 LPs. And they played the top tunes, but Lee had developed a format to go into sort of deeper cuts, as they called it, to get into some tunes that people didn't really hear on the radio or anywhere. And that's what the format was.
Wow, and it took off. It became the hottest format in the country,
Yes.
and it changed the economic model and the listening model for the United States for young audiences.
Yes, and Lee, I arranged for Lee to go to Atlanta. A friend of mine stationed there, and he went down there, Atlanta, then Chicago, and he became the most famous, popular program consultant in the country.
He was.
With the AOR format.
Wow.
Now, there are a lot of people who didn't like that kind of format,
Yeah.
especially older people. And the idea, because they didn't understand Pink Floyd, The Who, Rolling Stones, but we found out that it really was, that's what people wanted. Now, we had the advantage of having the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, NC State, Duke, Meredith, Peace, college-age audience right here, and they took to it.
Well, if you'd like to learn more about Carl, we're running out of time, but we have a long-form interview that we did, and you can watch our long-form interview by going on the web at ncbroadcastlegends.com. Again, that's ncbroadcastlegends.com. Carl, I am sorry we're running out of time. You have such a fascinating story to tell. After you left there, you got into lots of ownership and different things. Please go and watch our long-form interview. Thank you, Carl Venners, for being with us today and sharing part of your story and contributions.
Can I add one thing?
You can.
We later put on WRDU-FM after WQDR became a country music station, just to clarify that.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. And please join us again for another edition of North Carolina Broadcast Legends.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the North Carolina Broadcast Legends Production Fund, including contributions from the following: For a complete list of project funders, go to unctv.org/nclegends.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.